America wanted you to do what you did. Let's go. Let's move it along, Mel. Do you think media is either afraid of, protective of Deion and Shedeur Sanders? I said, don't Bobby Knight, Mike Krzyzewski me with pointing to one word of a whole broader sentence. So don't Bobby Knight me with this bullshit.
Do I think he's as good as the top three last year as a prospect? I don't. I don't think those three last year were really something.
I said, hey, man, you make that shit up about mental is the physicals 4-1. You just pull that out of your ass. Why didn't you say 5? Why didn't you say 3? The conversation off the air did not need to be repeated on the air, but it does make me laugh. So if you see why I'm laughing off the air, that's why. Hey, congrats. You said what everybody, let me back up. I love Mel Kiper. Mel Kiper's been really nice to me. He's come on shows. I talked to him. But America wanted you to do what you did. Let's go. Let's move it along, Mel. I thought that was great.
Well, Dan, I think the thing was, first of all, and I'm not doing that thing that Pete Thamel accuses me of where I say two things nice about somebody and then offer a critique or something. But the reason there were, 380,000 people or whatever and 750,000 or whatever the number was in Detroit the previous year is largely due to what Mel's done for the draft. And Mel's job is to make his rankings of players and defend them. And I didn't mind him disagreeing, and I don't mind him saying anything he wanted to say when we're there. But I thought that as a group, the part that we were overlooking was, the old Occam's razor philosophy. The most likely explanation for something is probably correct. We don't know for sure. But it was almost certain at that point in the draft that something had happened in the pre-draft process involving Shedeur Sanders that was keeping teams from taking him. Now, I think it's a reasonable debate if you say he's not a top 5 quarterback on tape at this time. I'm not sure that it's reasonable that you say he's not a, first or second round type guy. That seems to be a little unreasonable to me. So if you go beyond that, then something else probably happened. And my only point was I didn't think we were giving that the proper credence as to if you're drafting a guy, if teams are drafting a guy that they're not 1,000% sold on that is going to be their franchise quarterback, then you have to, as Thamel often says, and Pete Gillen always used to say, you have to be bigger than your problems, right? So if you have a problem, real or perceived, you have to be better than that. And in the judgment of the teams up to that point, it was pretty obvious to me they didn't see it that way. And that was the long and short of it. There was nothing else there. It's not because, in my judgment, that people couldn't evaluate quarterback. But the thing that I do love about Mel is that he stuck to what he believed. He kept on. And the other thing that I pointed out on my podcast yesterday, there was never a problem between Mel and me. I had people asking, are you guys okay? Yeah, we're great. Mel's a legend. I love working with Mel. We didn't have a single crossword in between. We were still joking about, the beach in Delaware and why he won't try certain things at dinner. And, it was fine. I didn't even know there was an issue until I started getting texts sort of like you were saying. And I was like, well, it's sort of part and parcel of what we do. Sometimes for the analyst's own good and for the good of the show, you challenge their positions. And that's, Mel's great. I love working with Mel, and he's the reason the draft is what it is, in my opinion.
See, the thing that I liked about it was and I didn't catch the whole thing. I actually came home and, the whole Sanders thing, but I liked the fact that it was really good TV. It wasn't cookie cutter TV. It wasn't, everybody up there singing Kumbaya and everybody's great. And, you know what I mean? That made it interesting. And I've talked to so many people that said the same thing. I got guys like, I never watched the draft, but this really was interesting. Rece and Mel having at it. Sanders, and ultimately that's what you're trying to do, inform and entertain and prognosticate.
Right. And it's kind of funny. I think with the two prongs of the draft that we have, the one that we do with the game day guys on ABC for the first 2 nights, and then the other one that's on ESPN for 3 nights, I think there's a little bit more of a place on the ESPN draft and on the one that I host on Saturdays to critique players a little differently. The idea behind College Game Day at the NFL draft is to document the draft first, of course, but it's also to tell our research shows a somewhat more casual football audience, who is this guy? What is he about? Why should you root for him? Why would you like him? What has he overcome to get here? What's a quirk in his personality that's entertaining or amusing or something? So we try to balance a little bit of that. Okay, here's what he's going to bring to the Bears, as opposed to, why did they trade, 4 draft picks last year for this? This is a bad move. We don't do a lot of that. It's more like, okay, this is what led us to this point to get there. Then on Saturday, it's a little bit more about, did they overpay? Did they pick a guy too high? Did they pick him too low? Is this guy a good fit for the scheme? That's a little bit more of what we get into on Saturday.
Somebody asked me this, and I'm going to ask you this. Do you think media is either afraid of, protective of Deion and Shedeur Sanders?
I'm sure some are. I think that when you paint with a broad brush like that you don't acknowledge the fact that there will be some people who are and some who aren't. And I think the flip side of that is, I think that there are also probably people who are predisposed not to root for him and to look for every little thing that you might not like. Deion has been great to me over the years. I have had limited interactions with Shedeur, just a couple, and they weren't long. He was great. I think he's very talented. I think he's got a charisma about him that could serve him well. But, I don't think that you can say absolutely that all sports media are trying to protect Deion and Shedeur, just as I think it would be unfair if you picked out a few guys who are saying he's not good enough. Deion did X, Y, and Z for him, and that's the only reason he's in this spot. I think that's unfair too. And so I think probably it's somewhere in the middle, Dan. There are people who are probably protective, and there are people who are unfairly critical.
Reason number 7,678 why Rece Davis is smarter than me, because he would have asked that question a lot better, because as soon as it came out of my mouth, I knew what the answer was going to be. And the answer was like, you can't say everybody. Like, what the hell?
It's all those years with Billis, Dan, of seizing on the little thing.
Yeah.
When you're debating Jay either on camera or off camera, you choose your words carefully because you're like, okay, right, he'll seize on that one. So you have to watch it.
I said that to him one time. I said, don't Bobby Knight Mike Krzyzewski me with pointing to one word of a whole broader sentence. So don't Bobby Knight me with this bullshit. People ask me this, and so I'll ask you that. What happened in your opinion, like with Shedeur Sanders? My view is everything is a job interview, unless, to your point about Pete Gillen, and coaches have always said it, a different way. Your talent better overcome you being a pain in the ass, that stuff. Mm-hmm. What do you think happened? Was it a culmination of, this is all a job interview, in my opinion, unless you're LeBron James, but it's all, maybe people will learn that this is a job interview, that actually maybe your response in interviews, maybe your response on pro days gets actually taken seriously. I don't know.
I think that's probably it. I think it was one of those things where the tape shows he's a really good player, and it does. And they probably wanted to see a little more. He probably could have served himself well, maybe by, doing more at the combine. I think maybe it was the Shrine Bowl or someplace he, opted not to work out, which is his right. But you have to approach it like a job interview, Dan, in that you have to say, okay, what is it that the employer needs to see from me in order to, commit not only millions, because it's not like the old days when, you got these gargantuan signing bonuses and it would hamstring a franchise for years if they made an error, but it's still a significant investment. And it's a significant investment in emotional capital, in equity with the fan base to try to get it right. So you want to get it right. And the thing that the thing that I haven't been able to buy is the people who say, well, you don't want the owners. I mean, I can see where the coaches might be hesitant, with another coach's son, with the flamboyance and charisma that Dion has. I can see a coach who might not be secure in his situation being inwardly, I would hope, hesitant. But an owner? Come on, man. Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders and his son playing for you. And he's really good. You're going to want that. You're going to want that because people are going to come and see that. And so I think it's probably exactly what you said. Now, I can't sit here and tell you. I've read all the things everyone else has, whether there's hyperbole involved or whether something has happened that's been exaggerated. But it's the only logical explanation for me is that they wanted to see him work out a little more. They wanted to see maybe a different type of approach in those meetings. And because of that, it made the vast majority, if not, well, it made every team uncomfortable until the Browns in the 5th round, and they chose not to take it. And, so that was a misstep in my judgment in their pre-draft process. But, it's over now, and he has an opportunity because he is a talented guy who understands ball, who's been well coached, not only by his dad, but by Pat Shermer and by Sean Lewis before that at Colorado, who has a chance to be successful. And he's also going into a place where there is not a clear-cut, defined quarterback of the future for that franchise. So it didn't go down on the days of the draft the way he had hoped and dreamed, I'm sure, but his career can. And I would say that he's in a lot better spot than if Buffalo, for instance, or Baltimore had decided to draft him where there's no chance he's playing, barring catastrophe. Now he's in a place where he might play. And so I think that, it can really work out in a positive fashion for him.
I've never seen this one before. Usually when a player like Abdul Carter asks a legend, can I wear your shirt? They always say yes, I think, anyway. Maybe, I don't know, you would know the history on it, but Lawrence Taylor said, no, make your own way, son. I thought that was unique.
Can I tell you something? I don't know why, because I really like Abdul Carter as a player, and I understand the graciousness. I kind of liked it. I don't know. I can't even really explain why. I was like, man, that's Lawrence Taylor, and I almost felt I was a little different. I thought it was very gracious of Warren Moon to tell Cam Ward he could wear the number 1. If that franchise were still in Houston and it were still the Houston Oilers, I might have said, hey, Warren, tell him to go back to 7, which is what he wore, I think, in Incarnate Word, or so I might have said that. But so I kind of liked it. It's like I still don't quite get why the University of Florida lets 15 be worn. And it used to be, Spurrier won the Heisman Trophy in 11. It used to be that only defensive players could wear 11, but I think they've changed that a little bit now, too. I mean, nobody needs to be wearing 15 at Florida, especially not at quarterback, other than Tim Tebow. And there are a few others like that. I wouldn't say anybody needs to be wearing 2 at Auburn except Cam Newton. So it's at least not on offense anywhere, not at quarterback. So I kind of liked what he did. I don't mind it. Maybe you wear 11 and keep that 11 number going.
Isaiah Thomas was bitching that I was number 11 the year after him. He's like, what are we doing? Like, what is wrong with you people out there?
Well, he probably did Indiana have the rule about that you had to graduate in order to have the number retired or put in the rafters or something? I think Duke has something like that. And Carolina has like very specific criteria about getting your jersey or your number put in the rafters.
Indiana did a cool thing that I always liked, and I don't think they've done it in a long time, but the number 42, like Jim Brown, 44 at Syracuse with Leroy Kelly, Jim Brown, number 44 was a really big deal. Indiana, number 42 on the basketball court. They haven't retired any numbers, but like I wanted to be number 42 when I came to Indiana, and I was paying attention to who got number 42, and there's a kid named John Flowers, who was a McDonald's All-American, all that stuff. But they never retired. They have never retired any. But they used to, like Tebow, it is. Do you think it's different in football? Is it different in football? I feel like Tebow, I agree with you on Tebow that nobody should wear 15, but I disagree with you in the sense that I liked Indiana's tradition of putting players in a certain number and you have to live up to that number. That's a bit hypocritical
like that.
of me, I think.
No, I don't. I don't. That's actually a really good point. Penn State does that largely with number 11. Bringing it back to Abdul Carter, you kind of have to be the guy. Will Johnson at Michigan, the defensive back, I think initially was going to wear 4, the number that Jim Harbaugh had, but then he got the 2 that Charles Woodson had, and for a DB, that kind of means you have to live up to a certain standard. So no, I'm good with that. I'm on all of these. It's fun to debate because we're sports fans, but I'm kind of good with whatever the teams, the programs, the institutions, the franchises, whatever level it might be. I'm kind of good with whatever they decide on it. I mean, it's fun for us to debate. I liked what LT did, but I'm not morally outraged if somebody, if the Broncos give somebody else number 7, like Elway or whatever, I'm not going to be outraged by it.
Yeah, like I got a lot of things, but that's why this is a great country. The stuff we get outraged by, that other countries would be like, "Who gives a shit? What is wrong with all of?"
It's my favorite. It's my favorite. Marlon Humphrey. Marlon Humphrey, the defensive back for the Ravens. It's my favorite recurring tweet that he pops up every now and then. He'll tweet and he'll say, "What are we mad about today?" Right. It cracks me up every time. I'm like, you've only done this like 50 times, Marlon, but I'm still laughing, so it's pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife always says, I sit over there, watch a show, and I'll just giggle about certain things, and that's one of them. Do you agree with the assessment? This has been the big assessment, and I do think Cam Ward is an unbelievable story. I've been to Incarnate Word. My friend was a basketball coach there. To go from Incarnate Word to the number 1 pick, do you agree with the success? And it's not ESPN, it's not you. It's, people are saying across the board. He got overshadowed. He was the most I'm not going to say disrespected, but he was the least of all of the number 1 picks in terms of celebrating what he did. You buy that?
I think he did get overshadowed a little bit, and I think it was because of the celebrity, the power, the charisma of Shedeur Sanders, and certainly Deion's reputation in the National Football League. I don't think it was nefarious or malevolent toward, Cam Ward. It was just, I think it was just one of those things where there was some intrigue. What was going to happen? People like drama, and at some point there became no drama around Cam. He had established himself as the number 1 quarterback in this draft. He was going to be taken, and, there was no drama around that aspect of it. So I think that was part of it. So I think a lot of the circumstances sort of conspired together. Had maybe it been a surefire lock that in the pre-draft process, it became completely known that the Giants were going to take Sanders at 3, I think it might have felt a little different with Cam Ward. But with that uncertainty, then you also factor in the big trade for the Jaguars to go up and get Travis Hunter. Then I think it was just a confluence of circumstances about that. But once again, the draft now is a linchpin. It's a pivot point for someone. It is certainly a milestone to be celebrated, but it's also just the first step. So now, Cam goes on, gives the Titans that much needed franchise quarterback for a long time. Then all of a sudden people don't think so much about whether he might have gotten as much attention as other number 1 overall picks. But that's sort of part of the draft every now and then too, Dan, is that when number 1 is selected, you're on to number 2. That's happened every year. Every year I've done the draft, Caleb Williams goes, everybody knows he's going to go. Okay, what's it going to be? It's going to be Jaden Daniels. Are they going to surprise everybody and take Drake May? What do the Patriots really hope? Do they hope that they go one way or the other? And, so all of that, it sort of happens every year. It was probably magnified a little bit because of the complete uncertainty about a couple of things. One, where Shedeur might go. But the other is because outside of a few franchises, there were so many quarterbacks selected early last year, and all of them, with the exception of J.J. McCarthy, who was hurt, had enough success that you felt really good about the prospects. Nobody feels as if they missed last year. Not even the Vikings, because Sam Darnold threw for 1 billion yards,
right,
and they're like, yeah, okay, we're going to go with the rookie, thanks. And so everybody feels like they hit. So you take those 6 who were quarterback needy last year, they're not anymore. Then you take the number of franchises who have established guys. So the math worked against it a little bit too, in addition to that.
Hey, let me ask you then, how good do you feel, or do people feel that you've talked to Cam Ward is? Because that's a lot of pressure, to your point. Guys have come in the league now, been pretty damn good.
Yeah, I think he's really good. Do I think he's as good as the top 3 last year as a prospect? I don't. I don't think those 3 last year were really something. I knew Daniels was really good, and he's way better than I thought he was. Way better. Because I've been on the Drake May bandwagon since early in his career at North Carolina. I think he's going to be great, and Caleb Williams is a sensational talent. Bo Nix way better than I thought. But I do think Cam has a real chance to be good. I think he's got sort of that leadership mentality. He really cares about football. He's had to build his own way, as you talked about. He ran the wing T in high school. Even when he was recruited to Incarnate Word, the coaches there were calling his personal quarterback coach and going, nobody else is after him. What are we missing? We feel like we're stealing him. And they were assured, you are. And they were. And, he beat out an incumbent there. He put up numbers. He went to Washington State, adjusted to the higher level of play quickly, and then obviously was a sensation last year for Miami. If they'd been a little bit better on defense, they might have gone to the playoff and done some real damage there. So I think he's got the right makeup to be exceptional, and we'll see what he does with it.
Last thing, and I'm keeping you too long, but I love talking to you. My guy, he's not my guy, but he's at my school, Kurt Signetti set a really high bar for a first-year coach coming in to a basketball school. What is enough? What are you looking for out of Bill Belichick? I know there's a lot of talk about girlfriends, all that crap, but what's a successful year for him coming to Carolina?
I think being competitive in all of the games, and probably winning 7 or 8. Just looking at it, Signetti set the bar so high. He's a tremendous coach and really smart. It also sort of worked for him. He brought some guys who were undervalued, maybe overlooked, maybe guys who had developed their games at James Madison. Now they were older, more mature, more physically developed, and ready to compete at that level. And he was able to bring them, a large group of them, with him. They did an outstanding job of finding other pieces to fit. So I don't anticipate that at North Carolina. I do think that the Bill will be really successful because he's a tremendous coach, and he'll be successful in terms of having them schemed up, coached up, well drilled from a fundamental standpoint, so that they don't do ridiculous things to beat themselves. That's the first mark of any program. I remember when our friend Bob Davie used to be on games, and if let's say North Carolina, for this example, was playing and they're making mistakes, Bob would say something like, "Let me tell you something now. The first thing they've got to do is get North Carolina off the schedule now." Like, meaning, get yourself off your schedule. And I think that the Tar Heels under Belichick will probably do a good job of that. And the question will be, have they procured enough talent this year to extend beyond, winning 7, 8 games, something like that.
Yeah, I remember a lot of stuff from Coach Knight, but the biggest is victory favors the team making the fewest mistakes. And
the thing I remember from all the years working with him, and I use it all the time, use it as a bit on our pod sometimes, he would look at me and go, "My boy, dumb loses more than smart wins."
That's right.
What is the mental is to the physical as 4 is to 1, right? Right.
I asked him one time, I said, "Hey man," he was in a light. I said, "You make that shit up about mental is to the physical is 4 to 1. You just pulled that out of your ass. Why didn't you say 5? Why didn't you say 3?" He told me, he said it was very scientific. Now leave me alone. I'm like, all right, I'll leave you alone.
So he didn't go any deeper than that. There was a study or something. Was it? He didn't. I don't think he just made it up. I can't
I don't either.
I can't vouch for the veracity of the study he cited, but he had a reason for it, as he did most everything.
Did. He did. But sometimes, in my own way, I like to get my own jabs in and question the almighty authority.
This shocks me, Dan. This actually shocks me about you now.
Yeah. You said something earlier about, speaking of coaches, you said something earlier about when we draft number 1, we're on the number 2. This is coaches. Like Mac Brown, let's just use him and Belichick. Mac Brown leaves. Everybody loves Mac Brown, one of the great guys, all that stuff. But you know what it is? It's like, I hate that Mac Brown is let go. I hate that. Okay, who's going to be the next coach? That's always in the next sentence. You know what I mean?
That's the way it is in life. Think about it.
Yes.
They're going to replace you. Hopefully, if you're well liked, they'll be sad about replacing you if you get eaten by an alligator, run over by a bus, or something like that. They'll be sad. I even joke with the guys on game day. I said, if I get hit by a bus on the way to the set, somebody will open the show and say, we're really sad that Rece got run over by a bus. We wish our best thoughts and prayers. And then they'll say, hey, Indiana's got Ohio State today. What do you guys think? and that's how it's going to be. It's kind of the way life is. Yeah.
Hey, Billis, read that card, that rest in peace card, will you please? Give Billis that card. Let him read about how sad we are about. Like the Bob Greasy card at Gays. Hey, love talking to you. Have a great.
I was saying it might be the final indignity is Billis reading that card. That be the final slap, right?
Yes. The online, the Jay Billis. We just learned of the passing of our friend Rece Davis. We're really sad. Hey, look, I think Duke's going to beat the shit out of North Carolina. What do you guys think? Thanks, Rece. Appreciate you, brother.
Dad, I'll see
Thanks
ya.
for coming on.